we're going to investigate and allow the weekend and the week to unfold. Just a little bit of an overview. And then Amma will guide us in honoring the precepts that will guide us and that will also be part of our structure for the week. And we'll close, send you off to bed. So, a little bit more for this evening as we enter into this practice together. As we've said that we both, as we were talking this week, we really wanted the week to be a time of remembering the Buddha's instructions around goodness and happiness. In the Metta Sutta, he says, his teachings, this is what is done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. So the teachings around the path of peace. The line in the Metta Sutta that has kind of really resonated for me this week is, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. So the whole purpose of our practice, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. And just sort of, That's what we want the theme of our week to be. Lots of times when we try to follow the teachings, we'll do readings, we'll study, we'll try to practice, and lots of times we're guided, we kind of know that that's sort of the general frame, but we're guided a lot by fairly abstract ideas about things. We read something and we go, right, and then when we try to practice it, either we forget to try to practice it. In fact, we kind of let our minds be like little, slave drivers and kind of pushing us and say, you should be different. You should be doing something different. But that the invitation of our practice, and certainly the invitation of a week of practice, or even a weekend of practice together, is to take the teachings, and I have my hand up here, to take the teachings that are all up here in our minds, and the ideas that we have in our minds, and to look directly in our lives and see, how does this really work? And not only how does this really work, but how does this really work for me? Here, now, with this. How does this really work? So it's a very personal kind of inquiry that each of us has to do on our own. And each of us at different times, and maybe always, will come up with sort of a different flavor or a different way of enacting the teachings, making them real for us. And that's really the reason we come away on retreat, isn't it? To give us some space where we can kind of settle in, not to be like, okay, I have to get this done, but to settle in to say, how does this work for me? What's mine? What's mine to do? Sometimes when we read about mindfulness, I was looking on Amazon at some of the titles about mindfulness, and some of the titles are really funny. There was one that was, what is it? Mindfulness for beginners. You've never had any instruction in mindfulness before. How to live in the moment, stress and worry-free in a constant state of peace and happiness. 217 pages, you got it. Like somehow you can read this book and then live in a constant state of peace and happiness. And it's how our world kind of tends to think about things, you know, when you take a pill or something. So the challenge really is to learn the principles indeed, you know, and that's why we read and study and listen to Dharma talks, but to then look and see, how does this really work? How does it work for me? And sometimes when we're reluctant to practice, or when we find ourselves, you know, we kind of give ourselves those little speeches about how we should practice more, we should practice longer, we should practice more effectively, you know, we should practice the way Amma practices or something, you know, we should do really. That sometimes when our practice doesn't seem to be working the way we think it should, it's because we're not really bringing it into our own experience deeply enough, and we're not looking clearly enough at how it works for me. And so again, so that's one of our wishes for the week, that we'll have a deeper understanding of a very personal take on some of the principles and some of the practices. A few weeks ago, I gave a talk that some of you heard on an appropriate response, talking about all the different Dharma doors. You know, in Theravada Buddhism, I think there are 37 or something, and in other forms of Buddhism, they talk about 84,000 different ways of practicing. But there also are different ways of practicing the practices, whatever practice we do, that really can vary from time to time, and can vary for each of us depending on our personality and our circumstances. It's sort of like if there's a doctor who goes through medical school and medical training, and then is working in the emergency room, and it's like, okay, what do you do with this? This thing that comes in. What are the tests that need to be done? What are the tests that we should not bother with because they're just not relevant to this circumstance? And to really inquire, to kind of use the skills, to have all these skills, but then to really kind of inquire, what's the medicine that's needed here in this circumstance? And so our practice when we come away on retreat is really that kind of an inquiry. What's the medicine that's needed here? And our challenge is to look carefully and listen kindly and directly to our own experience. And then to let the teachings guide us, but to let them know, to let ourselves know when this particular teaching isn't helping. It's not actually leading me in the way that the Buddha says, being skilled in goodness, knowing the path of peace, in gladness and in safety. That it's not really helping me to find that kind of freedom. What it's doing is making me tighter and more kind of stuck and more kind of shut down, and indeed even more reluctant to practice. So sometimes when we're reluctant to practice, it's because we haven't really kind of settled deeply enough into the teachings to make them personally our own. The Buddha had a lot of images about the practice. One is that Thanissaro talks about is of a post by the edge of the ocean that's really deeply buried in the sand, and that whatever waves come against it, it's able to be sturdy and navigate and be able to manage whatever comes. The Buddha sometimes talks about a safe harbor. Not like, okay, we hunker down and nothing ever touches us, but that we have some kind of stability and peacefulness no matter what else is going on around us. One of my favorite images that you hear me talking about a lot is the tuning of a musical instrument, the tuning of the lute. I love the image of a lute. I don't have any idea what a lute is, but I like it. This lute that's really beautifully tuned and that gets out of tune, and we have to kind of keep playing with it to keep bringing it back into balance. So it isn't like you tune a musical instrument and then it's like that for the rest of, the millennium. But that you tune it and it, things happen, it gets out of balance, and then we have skills for bringing the lute back into balance. And that's really what our practice is about. And our practice will be this week. So it isn't like we're always going to be serene and peaceful, but that we kind of look at the places where we're not so serene and peaceful, and we use the practice to inquire, what's happening here? What's happening here? This is dukkha. What's happening here? Where is the suffering? What is the suffering? What am I hanging on to in a way that's not so wholesome and not so skillful? How do I make this practice serve me really more effectively and more happily? You think about somebody, anybody who's trying to learn a skill. I think about me when I'm making bread or learning to make bread or cooking something, or somebody who's an artist or an athlete, or that there are certain kind of qualities that one must bring to learning that skill. And I'd like to talk about 4 of them that the Buddha taught. And they're called the 4 bases of, it's translated differently, the 4 bases of power, meaning that kind of power that enables one, like the post by the ocean. So the 4 bases of that kind of power. Or the 4 bases of success, so how our practice can really be nourishing and successful. And what, as I began to get interested in this a few weeks ago, it really was helpful for me, because I realized that each of us really might have at different moments in time, one of the 4 might be might be a doorway more so than another one. Just like an athlete at any given time might say, okay, what I need here is this. I need to have a little more vigor, or maybe I need to have a little less vigor. I need to kind of relax and just let go. So that I'd like you, as I talk about the 4, to just consider if there's one in particular. There may be, there may not be, but if there's one in particular that kind of strikes you as that, okay, that's interesting to me. That feels like something I could kind of play with this week and see. It's not necessarily the one that I ordinarily challenge myself with. So that maybe it might be one that you might find to be a kind of a new doorway that might bring a little bit of nourishment to your practice. The first base of success that really helps us to have that kind of stability in our practice, so that we can be mindful of what's going on and also kind of allow ourselves to both internally and externally be stable with it and at peace. So the first one is desire. Chanda, just desire. All of you have desire, you wouldn't be here. Zeal for practice, be like zeal for learning how to make bread, or zeal for learning how to golf, So there's some zeal, some desire for your meditation practice to really inform your life in a more meaningful, and indeed maybe a more meaningful way. So it's a desire that supports your efforts. A desire to say yes to what you're doing, so that we're not kind of coming to meditation or coming to this retreat out of I have to do this, like I have to learn how to make bread, or I have to go to the gym, But that there's a desire that drives that. so that it becomes a delight and an interest and a joy. Not so much for ego gratification, but because it's a goodness. So chanda, desire, a goodness. I desire the goodness. For others, persistence might be the sort of the immediate doorway. The energy of effort or persistence, of stick-to-itiveness, of diligence, of patience. It's kind of an interesting paradox of both enthusiasm and patience, diligence and patience. So a kind of persistence, the kind of persistence when that first loaf of bread doesn't come out quite right. Or the first apple pie, or the first golf swing, or that time at the gym, or the meditation practice, that it doesn't come out quite the way I thought it would. So that there's persistence, virya, some shoulder that we bring to it. Say, let me keep doing this. Let me keep at it. Working at it without becoming discouraged. Other people find that mindfulness and concentration works best when it's based on the quality of intent, citta, committing oneself to the task. One's overall state of mind, heart, or mood when you dive in and give it your entire attention. Giving it your entire attention, a wholeheartedness, a willingness to really, bring your whole being to the practice. Citta. And other people find that, it's called different things, analysis or investigation, vimansa. Investigation or curiosity. This was the one that really got me interested because I was like, yeah, I guess that's an appropriate response to thinking about curiosity. But realizing that sometimes I really push myself in persistence and diligence, when really what would be more wholesome for me is a little more curiosity around how does this work? Or how come it's not quite working? So investigation, so that we look at our experience and we see, oh, this is wholesome, this is really working in a wholesome way. What's helping it to do that? Can I do that more? And really kind of taking it apart the way our young children and grandchildren will take that new electronic gizmo and they're not reading the instructions, they're just kind of playing with it and tipping it upside down and inside out and pushing all the buttons and just being curious about how does this thing work. So is that what got me so interested is it was like, oh, right. When I'm struggling in my practice, I tend to kind of go in through the door of, I should be working harder. Whereas if I could go through a door of curiosity, it actually might be more wholesome for me. So finding solutions. What are the results if I do it this way? Does it work better? Does it work worse? Allowing ourselves to make mistakes. Learning from the mistakes. Devising solutions and improvements. Taking the teachings and saying, well, it doesn't work quite like that for me. It works a little bit better if I do it this way. And it doesn't work the same for me as it does, for my friend. It's a little bit different. So allowing ourselves to experiment with our practice. Not just trying to push some abstract idea about what our practice should look like or what some book says it's supposed to be like or what's supposed to happen, but allowing ourselves to experiment, to see how does it work for me in this moment, in this circumstance, what's needed. An image that I saw was about somebody offered the image of cleaning a crystal vase. You know, these 4 qualities that our mind, you know, the teachings are that, you know, the mind, this mind that gets us in so much trouble, gets us all cluttered up and confused, or this mirror, the Suttas talk about the mirror that's all obscured and clouded over, and that our practice is a practice of cleaning the mirror or uncovering the gold that's covered up. In this case, it's cleaning a crystal vase that's all kind of cloudy and yucky. You know, those vases where the flowers have been in them too long and they get all kind of yucky and clouded. And so, but it's very delicate in cleaning it. So it's handled and looked upon with love and care. So there's an aspiration, this beautiful thing, to clean it, to clear it. To have it not be clouded, not be encumbered. So there's chanda, there's an aspiration. Cleaning and polishing it requires exertion and effort. We have to bring some energy to it. Energy of care, of you know, in all sorts of ways. Virya. We have to attend and concentrate and focus, chitta, so that the vase is not dropped and damaged or broken. And we have to investigate it to see if the entire vase is clean. Are there spots that I've missed? Does it need to be done again? Does it need to be dried? Does it need something else? That investigation. So those 4 qualities are needed, but at any given moment, one or the other of them might be a doorway for me personally that is supportive and nourishing for my practice. So as we allow ourselves to listen more deeply to what are our own experiences, that's why we're on retreat. That's why we invite noble silence, so that each of us can really be present and listen to our experience. Drop out of all the concepts that we have about how we're supposed to be. Drop out of all the distractions from our daily lives and the world. Really listening to our own experience. And the heart can realize its own beauty, its own courage, its own strength, its own power. And what is revealed is something pristine and clear and beautiful, like that polished mirror, or that gold, or that crystal vase. The tender, merciful heart, and its infinite abilities to hear the cries of the world and to respond well. But without that clarity, we can't get far. So that's why we're here. That's why we practice. That's what we'll be inquiring into over the weekend and over the week. As we play and experiment and investigate together this clarity of mind that enables us to be in this world without being destroyed by it, and being able to offer whatever benefit we can offer from a place of wholeness and goodness.